Today we're talking about Immanuel Kant and his categorical imperative. Now, Kant is one of the absolute giants of the whole Western philosophical tradition. After Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, Kant has got to be the name of the most historical significance. He was a German philosopher, and he lived from 1724 to 1804. He's really one of the great minds, perhaps the greatest mind of the entire Enlightenment. His three most important works all start with the word critique. The epochal critique of pure reason came out in 1781. We are reading an excerpt from his ethical work, The Critique of Practical Reason, which came out in 1788. And then his work on aesthetics and related matters, The Critique of Power of Judgment, came out in 1790. These are the three great critiques. But again, we're reading from the second one. Now, for Kant, what really matters in ethics is your intentions, your motivation. So for Kant, the only thing of absolute intrinsic value in the world is a good will, that is, good character, that is, intending and choosing the right thing. Here's what doesn't matter. Your talents don't matter. For example, maybe you got a high IQ, you're super smart, and clever. That may be important for being a smart person and for all sorts of other things, but it doesn't have moral value. The qualities of your temperament are just kind of characteristics that you're born with. And this is one thing that distinguishes him perhaps from Aristotle. Aristotle would have said that courage and resolution and perseverance, things like that, those are virtues, excellent character traits, which are morally valuable. For Kant, they're just sort of qualities of your temperament, your personality that you're born with. What really matters is your choices and the intentions and motivations of your choices, the goodwill. Also, what doesn't matter for Kant, it doesn't have any moral value anyway, are what he calls gifts of fortune. So it doesn't matter how powerful or rich or healthy or happy you are. That's not really what ultimately matters. What matters is your will, what you choose to do. Okay, so, and here's a really important point of contrast. For Kant, happiness is not the ultimate good. Happiness is not the ultimate good. Why do I want to stop here and emphasize this? Because next week, we're going to be studying utilitarianism, philosophy of John Stuart Mill and others. And for utilitarians, happiness is the ultimate good. The right thing to do is to maximize world happiness. And you know, in another way, you might think that Aristotle and Aquinas and even Hobbes, for them, happiness does have intrinsic and maybe ultimate value. When you think about Aristotle and Aquinas, they want to live the good life. They want flourishing to happen. They want to be happy in a deep and rich and full way. But still, happiness is a goal. And for Hobbes, self-interest, everything is driven and ought to be driven by self-interest. People who want to be happy, maximize their own well-being. And for Kant, that stuff just does not matter. It's not intrinsically good. It's not what's valuable. Here's why. He thinks that sometimes happiness is bad and sometimes misery is good. What matters is whether or not you deserve to be happy or miserable. So, for example, the happiness of the wicked is not a good thing. He says, an impartial, rational spectator can take no delight in seeing the uninterrupted prosperity of a being graced with no feature of a pure goodwill. A goodwill seems to constitute the indispensable condition even of worthiness to be happy. So the happiness of bad people is a bad thing. Happiness is not always good. On the other hand, a goodwill, that is choosing and doing the right thing, is not good because of what it affects or accomplishes, Usefulness does not add to or detract from the value of a good will. If you will or choose to do a good thing, and then it turns out, for whatever reason, a lot of misery results from that. But your action was still moral. It was still right. It was still valuable. Your choice was a good one, whatever the results may be. It's not about the happiness or misery that may result. It's about your choice in itself has moral value. So it's goodwill which is essential to the moral worth of our actions, not the consequences, not the results. And that's a crucial point of contrast. For Kant says, damn the consequences. It's the right intentions which matter, which are morally significant in our choices. Now, for Kant, actions are valuable if and only if they are done from duty, not merely in conformity with duty, and not merely from an immediate inclination. Now, what do I mean by acting from duty? That means I do an action because it's the right thing to do, because it's the one I have a duty to do. That's what motivates me. I do it for its own sake, because it's the right thing. It's not enough merely to act in conformity with duty. What do I mean by conformity with duty? That's when I do the right action, but I don't do it because it's right. I don't do it because it's my duty. I do it because it's convenient for me, or it works out for me, or it's in my best interest somehow. So let me give you an example. Let's say I own the 7-Eleven, and a little kid, a 5-year-old kid, let's say, comes into the store by himself. His parents ought to be, they ought to be involved. But in any case, let's say they're not. He's got a $20 bill, and he gets a Snickers bar, costs, 99 cents, and brings it up to the counter and puts a $20 bill down. And the kid obviously doesn't know how to make change. I could give him back a nickel for change, and he wouldn't know the difference. And I'd keep that $20 bill, and he'd have a 99-cent Snickers bar. I could do that. It would be wrong, but I could do that. However, let's say I'm a shopkeeper, and I'm not a good person. It's not enough for me that, well, the right thing to do is to give him the $18.01, $19.01 that I owe him. I don't care about my duty, but I do care about my business. And if I take this kid's 20 and give him back a nickel and change, well, if word gets out, guess what's going to happen? Well, the police may come and get me, and my store may get the reputation of being a dishonest place that cheats little kids. All kinds of bad stuff might happen to me. So the shopkeeper might give the kid back his $19.01, the correct change, not because he's acting from duty. He's not motivated by what's right, but he does do the right action. That is, he's acting in conformity with duty because he gives him the right change. Now, for Kant, acting in conformity with duty does not make your action moral. It's only a morally valuable action if it's done from duty. The shopkeeper has to give the kid the correct change because it's the right thing to do. And unless that's his motive, even if he does the right thing outwardly, his action does not have moral value. He's only acting in conformity with duty. It's also not enough to act merely from an immediate inclination. That is, because you feel like it. Kant doesn't care what you feel like. In fact, if you're motivated just by your feelings, I feel like doing the right thing now, he thinks that has no moral value. Your action only has moral value if what motivates you is the fact that it's your duty, and that's enough for you. No matter what you feel like, that's irrelevant. You're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing. So let me give you an example here. An example of acting merely from an immediate inclination. Most of us, most of the time, have an immediate inclination to preserve our own lives. We want to live. That's what we feel like doing, saving our own lives. Now, Kant thinks we also have a duty to preserve our own lives. So we got two things going on here. We've got a duty to preserve our own lives, and we also feel like it most of the time. If you preserve your own life, but you only do it because you feel like it, and not because it's your duty to do it, well, that has no moral value. You got to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not just because that's what you feel like, that's what you want to do. That's irrelevant. I don't care about your feelings, what you want. I care about your duty, says Kant. How do you know whether you're preserving your life only from duty or simply because you feel like it? Well, Kant would say, I mean, people know when they really get to those bad times where they don't feel like living anymore. They might actually feel like ending their own lives. And then you really know whether they've been preserving their own lives from duty or just because they feel like it. If you're acting for duty, it doesn't matter if you feel like dying or not. You're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing, and you're going to preserve your own life. So what you feel like doing, your immediate inclinations, is not morally valuable. What matters is doing the right thing because it's your duty. Okay. So Kant's ethic is focused on duty, the concept of duty. And ethical theories that are focused on the concept of duty are called deontological. It comes from the root word deo, which is Greek for, means you must, necessity. That's what duty is all about. Not about consequences or what you feel like. All right, let's talk about kinds of duties then. Kant introduces two distinctions. First of all, he distinguishes between perfect and imperfect duties. And then he also distinguishes between duties we have to ourselves and duties we have to other people. And when you combine those two distinctions, you get a grid of 4 classes of duties, 4 kinds of duties. Perfect duties to yourself, perfect duties to others, imperfect duties to yourself, and imperfect duties to others. Now, what is this? What's the difference between perfect and imperfect duties? A perfect duty is one that you have to do all the time. There are no exceptions at any time. You can't take a break from a perfect duty. Imperfect duties are ones that you have to do, but you don't have to be doing them continuously at all times. So let me give you an example. I would say you have a perfect duty to, say, preserve your own life or to tell the truth. You can never take a break from those, self-preservation or truth-telling. On the other hand, you have an imperfect duty to, say, give to the poor. You have to do it, but you don't have to be doing it all the time. You have to do it regularly. So perfect duties tend to be what you might say are negative duties, which means they're a duty you have to refrain from doing from certain things. So you have a perfect duty to preserve your own life. That means you should always refrain from suicide. You should have a perfect duty to tell the truth. You should always refrain from, you should not lie. On the other hand, these imperfect duties require more positive action, and that's why you can't be doing them all the time. So let's take some examples. Again, you have a perfect duty to yourself to preserve your own life. You can never take a break from that duty and commit suicide. You have a perfect duty to others to tell the truth, to make sincere promises. When you promise, you have to fully intend to keep that promise. And you have to keep the promises you've made. You can never take a break and just tell some white lies or make some false commitments. You have an imperfect duty, however, to yourself to cultivate your talents to become useful. So let's say that I have some, I'm good at math. Well, I have a talent for math. I have an imperfect duty to myself to cultivate that, to study math, to get better at math, to become the best mathematician I can, or to cultivate my whatever talent I have. Maybe it's for soccer or something. I owe it to myself to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, be doing math or soccer. I have to do it, but I don't have to be doing it at all times. It's an imperfect duty. Similarly, I have an imperfect duty to others, like I said, to say, give to the needy. Now, that doesn't mean, because it's an imperfect duty, that means that I can take breaks from it. I can give to the needy on Saturdays, and then the rest of the 6 days of the week, keep my earnings and the other stuff I need to do. I don't need to be giving to the needy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those are the kinds of duties that Kant outlines. Here's what we haven't spelled out yet. We know that Kant's ethic is based on a goodwill. We know that he wants us to do our duty, and he's got these different kinds of duties. How does he know what our duties are? Like, how do you figure that out? What's his rule for telling you the right thing to do? Or how does he determine this is your duty and this is not your duty? Excellent question. The short answer to that question of what's the right thing to do for Kant is the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative. Now, an imperative is a command, something you have to do. What is a categorical imperative? Let me skip ahead to the next slide here. To understand a categorical imperative, try contrasting it with a hypothetical imperative. Sorry. Oops. Back to the right slide. Okay. Kant distinguishes between hypothetical and categorical imperatives. Categorical is what he cares about. That's what morality is about. A hypothetical imperative is, a command or a rule or a prescription. It expresses what you practically ought to do, assuming that you have a certain desire or goal. For example, let's say you want to pass this class. If you want to pass this class, then you ought to study. That means the most effective way for accomplishing this goal is to study. Or if you want to lose weight, then you should exercise more and eat fewer calories. Those are hypothetical imperatives. Those are imperatives that apply to you only on the hypothesis that you have a certain goal. So whether or not you ought to follow that imperative, that hypothetical imperative, depends upon what your personal goals are. Do you want to pass this class? Do you want to lose weight? Categorical imperatives are imperatives, they're commands, they're prescriptions that apply to you regardless of what your personal desires or goals are. You ought to tell the truth no matter what your personal goals are. God doesn't care what you hope to do in life. You need to tell the truth. That's a categorical imperative. And that's what is morally binding. It's not morally wrong intrinsically to determine that you don't want to pass this class or you don't want to lose weight. That all depends on a bunch of other stuff. It depends on your personal goals. But morality, that applies to you regardless of what your personal desires or goals are. And this raises the question, what is morally binding? What does the categorical imperative tell us to do? Thank you for asking. Now, Kant, and this is kind of exasperating, but Kant has 3 different formulations, 3 different ways of stating the categorical imperative. And he says these are all equivalent to each other. They all mean the same thing. It's from different angles, and they tell you to do the same thing. Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. Whatever. I'm going to read to you and briefly talk about all 3 formulations of the categorical imperative. The one that you have to memorize and that we are going to focus on is the first one, the formula of the universal law of nature. So this says, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Now, if that made any sense to you on the first reading, you were a genius and you should major in philosophy instead of Kant. I don't expect that it did make sense to most of you. I will unpack it for you in just a second. But first of all, let me talk about the other 2 formulas, which are a little bit simpler. So the humanity formula. Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. Now this Don't ever use people as instruments to accomplish something else that's good. You should treat them as an end in themselves. That's the way that you respect and honor their humanity. Even if what you're trying to accomplish is a good thing for them or for other people, you can't use people as tools. You've got to treat them as intrinsic goals, like people who have who are ends in themselves and not just things to be used to accomplish some other purpose. And then there's the autonomy formula, which says act so that through your maxims, you could be a legislator of universal laws. That is, you should act in ways so that the whole world could follow the rules that you are following in your actions. Act like you are the lawgiver for the universe. All right. Let's go to that, back to this formula of the universal law of nature and try to unpack it a little bit. So every time that you act according to Kant, you're following a certain maxim. A maxim is like a rule of action. So let's say, for example, here's our scenario. Let's say I need some money. I need a loan. But I know I'm not going to be able to pay this loan back. The only way I can get a loan is if I promise to pay it back, and I know that that promise is false. So the only way to get a loan is to make a false promise to the bank. Now, if I go ahead and I lie to the bank, I say, yeah, I'm going to pay you back next week, and they give me that loan, and here's the maxim that I am acting upon. The maxim would be, whenever you need a loan, promise to repay it, even if you know you can't. Now, that's what a maxim is. Now, the categorical imperative says this: you should act only according to that maxim, by which you can at the same time will or intend that it should become a universal law. In other words, only act on a maxim if it makes sense for you at the same time to wish that everyone else would also act on that same maxim. So if we want to test our action here, we want to test the maxim we're acting on, ask ourselves this: what would happen if everybody followed the maxim that I'm acting on right now? What if everybody made false promises to repay their loans even when they couldn't? Well, what would happen is that nobody would make loans anymore. Why? Because everybody would be defaulting on their loans. If everybody defaults on their loans, the bank can't, this is not going to be rational for the bank to make loans anymore. So I can't act on this maxim. I can't make a false promise to the bank to get a loan and at the same time intend that everyone should do the same. Why? Because if I intended that everyone do the same, I would be really hoping for a situation in which the bank didn't give loans anymore. If everybody acted on my maxim, it would be self-defeating. If I universalize this maxim that I'm acting on, there would no longer be any point in me acting on it because it would become self-defeating. Nobody would be making loans. Therefore, a false promise of loan repayment violates the universal law of nature formula of the categorical imperative. According to Kant, it is therefore morally wrong to act in that way. So in short, the universal law of nature formula says only act in ways that can be rationally universalized. For Kant, all of our duties are generated by reason. Everything is about reason. And this categorical imperative is saying, is it rational for you to act on this maxim? Is this a universally valid, binding, rational maxim? And it's not. It would be self-defeating if everybody did this, he says. So it falls short of the demands of practical reason. Look, this universal law formula, I think it's difficult to apply and it's difficult to figure out how to apply in particular cases. In fact, this is like his own example about making false promises to repay the loans. It's really the only one that I think is easy to understand how it would actually work out. This one Tinker Toy example. If you ask me, like, okay, how would the categorical imperative and the universalization criteria, how would that apply to some other kind of life circumstance? I think it's kind of tough to vision. Think about it. What would this formula say about, say, I don't know, shoplifting a Snickers bar? Okay, so if we act on the maxim that says, whenever you're hungry, take a Snickers bar, even if you don't pay for it. What would happen if everyone did that? Well, if everyone did that, I guess they'd stop leaving Snickers bars out on the shelves in the 7-Eleven anymore because everybody'd steal them and it wouldn't be profitable to sell them. So it would be self-defeating for me to act on that maxim and at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So I guess that's how it's supposed to work. I find it very difficult to figure out how to apply this and run my actions through this test all the time. But that's the basic idea. Now, Kant is super hardcore about his ethics, and especially super hardcore about not caring about the consequences. All that matters is whether an action is rationally your duty or not. So, for example, here's a very famous case that Kant talks about. Okay, Kant thinks you should never, ever lie. It violates the categorical imperative. So here's his argument against lying. We should do only those actions that conform to rules that we would be willing to adopt universally. That's his categorical imperative. But if you lie, you would be following the maxim, it's okay to lie. If that maxim, but this maxim could not be adopted universally because then it would be self-defeating. If everybody lied, no one would believe each other, and then it would be impossible and pointless to lie because nobody believes you anyway. So it can't be universalized, therefore you should never lie. How serious is he about this prohibition on lying? Super serious. So he says this. He says, let's think about this case. Let's say somebody knocks on your door one day, and it's your friend Bob, and Bob says, hey, quick, hide me. There's a crazy person coming behind me, and he wants to kill me. Hide me in your house. And so you say, great, Bob, run hide behind the couch. 3 minutes there, there's another knock on your door, and it's a crazy person with a machine gun and says, hey, is Bob in here? Because I'm trying to kill him. Now, the person asked you, is Bob in here? Bob is in there. You know Bob's in there. What are your options? Let's say you can't be silent. Let's stipulate that. You got to say one thing or the other. Do you say, yes, Bob is in here? Is that morally permissible to say? Or is it permissible morally for you to say, no, he's not here. He went the other way? And Kant says, you can't lie. You got to tell the truth. You got to tell that person, yeah, Bob's in here. You can't lie. That's how serious Kant is. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, he's going to come in and kill Bob. You're complicit in his murder. Kant says, no, you're not. Kant says, that murder is on the murderer. You didn't kill him. It's still wrong for you to lie, even in that circumstance. The consequences of an action are not what make it right or wrong. Damn the consequences. The only thing that matters is your having a good will and good intention. In this case, your intention is to tell the truth. But you might be thinking, but you're also intending to let Bob die. That's not good. Kant would say, no, you're not intending to let Bob die. I mean, maybe you're going to fight that guy. Maybe you're going to tell the person, don't shoot Bob. He is in here, but don't shoot him. You need to get help or something. Whatever. Maybe you're going to give your life trying to protect Bob or something like that. The point is, you can't lie. No matter what you do, you can't lie. And Kant would say this. Kant would say, look, if you tell the truth and bad consequences happen, that's not on you. That's on the other person. But if you tell a lie and bad consequences happen, that is on you because you told a lie. So, for example, let's say you lied to the killer at the door and you said, no, he's not here. He ran the other way. And then the killer said, man, I'm so frustrated because I can't find Bob. I'm just going to shoot up the rest of the neighborhood. Well, Kant would say, that's on you. That's your fault because you told this lie. If only you told the truth, that wouldn't happen. So bad consequences that happen as a result of your moral wrongdoing, that is on you. But bad consequences that happen because of truth telling, that's not on you. Bad consequences. What do you think? Do consequences matter? Do they determine whether or not an action is right or wrong? Are you Kant and you want to damn the consequences or not? Do you think, no, the consequences do matter? Kant says it's only your intentions that matter. Other people are going to say consequences matter too. Think about it. Worry about it. We'll talk about it in class.